Today on the Self Smarter podcast.
The best type of listening is what you're processing internally, not necessarily what you're saying back. And I think where I have fallen short is I just want to respond to everything verbally because I felt like that was the right thing to do. I've had to learn to just process some of these things. Hi, we're Danelle and Megan, the hosts of this conversation-centric podcast for leaders seeking to be better every day. Whether you choose to be a leader in the workplace, at home, or in your community, we believe the most effective leaders are equipped to not only be self-starters, but self-smarter.
Hello and welcome to Self Smarter. I'm Megan and this is my friend and co-host Danelle.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. Today we're here to talk about, are you a good listener? Leader? Are you a good listener?
Well, I haven't always been, and I still struggle with it, but that's why I want to talk about it today.
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it.
It's definitely a skill set we all need.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of writing, listening, writing.
Wow.
Boop.
That was a hell of a transition, but okay.
Sorry, I meant to say, let's talk about the writer strike.
Yeah.
That's happening right now.
If you're listening to this podcast and you like television shows or movies,
You're going to be listening a lot soon.
You better pick out the shows you like best because repeat's going to be necessary. And so just a little bit backstory, and I told Meg I wanted to talk about this because I feel like I've had exposure to a bit of knowledge that the common person doesn't know. Because I'm in New York City.
Yes.
I've made friends with
the who's who and the whatnot.
No, that's not true. Oh, they are in there. Yeah. I just mean I've made friends outside of
course,
this industry. And, you know, and one of my friends, Jessica.
Okay.
Actually, I met her through our dear friend, Jill, in the industry. She's an actress. She's been on television, live stage. She was the mother in Dear Evan Hansen at the beginning.
Like, so she's like known in
you might recognize
stage
her. Stage world for sure. And then she's been on some very notable. Hi, Jessica. Yeah, she listens to the podcast. Very notable television shows as well. And then her partner is also in the business, and she works more live performance. But anyway, I had them over for dinner recently, and I just asked, could you just help me understand what does this ultimately mean? Like, I understand what a writer strike is. I understand why writers are striking. I understand why that's important. I think most of us can watch a news snippet for 1 or 2 minutes and get the gist. But the way that they explained it to me were things I had not even thought of. And really what it comes down to is I clarified this with them. There was wine involved. But I said, so what I'm hearing is that the advent of streaming, which we love as the listener, has really impacted negatively the people that are behind the scenes, the writers. And it goes deeper than that.
Really?
Oh, yes. Because if you think about it and the way Jessica was explaining it, and Jessica, if I chop this up, I'm really sorry, but I know I'm going to get the gist of it correct, is that when you, like say for instance, she was explaining, when I did television show XYZ, I got paid to do that television show, but then when they would rerun it on television, I would get paid. I would get paid again.
Royalties
or whatever it's called. It's called, I think it might be called something else for actors. Well, the writers would get the same. So she could go do a show, and as long as the television, companies were re-showing it, there were commercials.
Okay.
Commercials were able to pay the people who created it, made it all happen in all the ways. So it's certainly the actors, but the writers, the stage people. And if nothing else, it kept her in insurance. Okay, so Jessica has two beautiful sons. And so, and so when streaming comes about, you do the thing and
I pay a monthly fee.
Right. But that's not enough to pay all the people who created the content, and it runs thousands and thousands of times. It depends on how many times you want to watch it. Think about that for a minute. What are we paying? Like $10, $20 a month for,
I know,
and we have multiple.
It's low.
It's low. And I know there's probably more.
Yes.
But the math doesn't add up. And guess who's getting rich? The producers. So someone's getting rich. The money's still there. And then they started giving me these stats on the dollars that the actors or the writers are actually asking for compared to what a streaming service might garner in a time period, and it's grotesque.
Like they want something small.
Oh, it's
comparatively,
percentage wise, it is not a lot.
Ooh, you're on your soapbox today.
I am because I think about it, and look, there's going to be winners and losers as things evolve. Yeah. There were people who lost when we went from CDs to digital music, right? Like there's winners and losers and all the things. But when I think about the artists who create the stuff that we're willing to pay for. So what's going to happen is it's not going to be now. It's not now. We're not paying attention to this now. But come next year.
There's stuff in the can, as they say.
That's right.
Meaning it's ready to roll.
Right. One of my favorite shows just released their new season this week, Billions. I love Billions. It's on Showtime. And it's the last season. Well, there's a reason why it's probably going to be the last season. Well, because no one's there to write or produce it. This was made half a year or more ago, because it's been in editing. So I don't know. I just would say if you enjoy television or streaming services or if you enjoy watching these shows, you might just want to educate yourself. Don't take my word for it, but educate yourself a little bit on what's going on, and almost literally, like the reason why I want to bring this up is almost prepare yourself.
Yes.
Because we are going to be limited with what we're going to be able to see. And then, it's fun when it's new. And we look forward to those. You think about the poor kids of Stranger Things, like that whole show. And like they were giving me all these examples. Again, I'm not as articulate with the rally cry that I'm trying to share, but I'm just saying I was blown away. And it actually made me a bit angry.
Oh.
It did not make me feel good.
Okay.
And it's not impacting live performances yet, but when I think about the artists who make the music, I mean, we just talked about Taylor Swift, we just talked about her on a number of episodes, but one of the things we talk about is how she took back the rights to her music because she wasn't being treated fairly. She's the artist that made that. Yes, she signed the contract, and yes, and we can argue and debate that all day long. When I think about artists, I think about that who's the advocate? They have to be the advocate for themselves. And I mean, my friend is no longer eligible for insurance. So I don't want you to think, it's just the writers are being greedy and they just want more money. No, they want something that's kind of equitable. And I was like, that's all you're asking for? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. That's not equitable even if you get it. But it's more than what they're getting. Mm-hmm. And then now we have this issue with how they're supported and through their unions and how all of this stuff works. And so I'm probably belabored this way too much, but I just feel
we have to talk about.
Very passionate about it.
As leaders, we have to talk about it.
We do.
And you're a business owner. Mm-hmm. So I think it coming from you, because I think a lot of people could easily sweep this under the rug. Mm-hmm. Your plea or your thoughtful introduction could be swept under the rug as like, well, that's, that's not for me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, it does.
If you care about entertainment.
Right. But I mean, even if, no matter where you sit in terms of, how you vote.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
This is not that.
No, not at all.
This is about human beings being compensated so that they can have health insurance.
Yes.
Like it's basic.
It is. And it's not like there's not money there. It's who's getting the money. Yes. And, y'all know that we own a marketing agency that caters, it did exclusively until we started to expand the fresh produce industry. So I've had the same conversation about what the farmer gets paid for what they grow.
For a long time.
I understand it because I'm on the front lines with the people who grow and bring us our fresh food. So I didn't know it though. I had to learn it.
Yeah.
And I started caring about the farm bill. And again, there's so many different directions. All I'm saying is I think the people that listen to our podcast care about these types of inequalities. Yeah. And what's right. And I just want you to know if you've caught a snippet or realize that there's a strike, sometimes strikes can be seen as, I don't know, they can be seen in a negative light. What I want you to encourage you to do is learn a little bit more about this because to me, it's an easy fix and it's just, and they're not thinking it's going to be corrected until next year.
Is anyone doing anything relative to this strike that's inappropriate or harming others?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
Oh, in terms of the people who are striking? Yeah. No. In fact, they're all over. The strikes are happening all over New York.
Right.
And they're peaceful and they're outside of my Whole Foods.
They have every right to do that.
That's right. Yeah.
Peaceful protest, man.
Yes.
So yay.
You can learn a lot. Anyway, I didn't mean to.
Woo!
My 10-minute soapbox.
Are you still here, listeners?
Yes, sir. Whoops.
We're going to talk about good listening. Have you been listening? Okay. All right. Before we jump into our episode, let's go to this quick advertisement. Sometimes leaders juggle many roles at once and find it hard to get it all done, much less get it all right. One of the things we have struggled to develop over the years is our ability to recruit, hire, and retain the right people for our organization. We learned a long time ago that we couldn't reach our true potential without a process to guide us on the hiring and onboarding journey without tools. That's why we've created a tool for you available now on BeSelfSmarter.com. It's called the Recruiting and Onboarding Guide. And for $49, you can be on your way to managing the interview process more effectively, have a more comprehensive approach to identifying the right individuals during the hiring process. We offer recommended interview questions for HR professionals and hiring managers. And we offer pertinent questions to ask that will provide insights into a candidate's qualifications, experience, cultural fit, and work ethic. There's also an onboarding checklist for new hires for you to use in this guide, and also a structured onboarding process recommendation that will support the newly hired employee's acclimation to the work environment to become productive and significantly contribute to the success of your organization. It's available and it's affordable and a click away at BeSelfSmarter.com. All right. So why are we talking about listening today? Believe it or not, the ability to really listen may be one of the more important traits of a good leader. During this pod, we hope you'll reflect on your communication with those that you lead this week. So that's really our intention here, is for you to think about you and those who you lead to determine where your life requires listening so you can guide success.
Mm-hmm. And I'd also like to add, you might want to listen to this episode, not just from a leadership perspective, but just as how you're showing up with all the folks in your life.
Totally.
So, yeah. So I've been this is something I'm working on continuously. And it was one of the main things that when I got the 26% approval rating that I the consultant I worked with was like, you're not a good listener, and gave me examples of what came out in the anonymous
I don't know that
survey.
you ever told me that.
Yeah. You need, well, maybe she didn't say it like that, but she said one of the things you need to work on is listening.
Okay.
People, you'll hear what people say, but that's hearing something's different than literally active listening, and you need to work on that more. I'm not saying I have it down, but I've definitely worked on it. Yeah. So one of my favorite business marketing authors of all time is Seth Godin. That's not a surprise to anybody that listens to our podcast, but if you don't, here you go, Seth Godin. And I have interesting relationships with his work, but one of the things that impacted me from him was he wrote his most famous book that got his start was The Purple Cow. And it was like how to be remarkable. And it's like a purple cow on the front of the cover, but it was thin.
Miss it if you
right.
See it.
And so when I left my corporate post, so literally flying from Miami back to Dallas, I picked up this book and I read it on the way back to Dallas, and it gave me the confidence that I needed to go out on my own. And so Seth has been with us since then. He writes a blog. You can subscribe to it. It's free. It comes to you every single day. And he has just knowledge. He's one of the most wise. He is so wise.
Yes.
And Meg and I often have joked through the years, because we've been a fan of Seth since we've known each other, because I brought Seth. I mean, when Meg started working at DMA 16 years ago, I was already a Seth fanatic. So we've read all of his books, and I've seen him speak live and met him, been in his office. So Seth is a huge guide in my life. But when you read his blog post, sometimes you're like, I swear he just listened to our conversation. It's interesting how those messages show up. So I really love what he says about listening. And so I've kept passages through the years, because I think the way he talks about listening is what made me care about it more. I certainly cared when I realized through the rating, the ugly rating, I should call it, that listening was something I needed to work on. I don't think I fully understood that. I thought that just meant talk less.
Okay.
I thought listening meant talk less, because I am a talker, clearly. But he's taught me so much more about what listening is. And so I've listened to several books. I've done several things, but it's his teachings, and that's what we want to share most today. But there's some other good things we're going to share too. So one of his posts, he says, listening is difficult. Hearing happens when we're able to recognize a sound. Listening happens when we put in the effort to understand what it means. Again, his teachings are easy to understand. Yes. He says that listening not only requires focus, but it also requires a commitment to encountering the experience, intent, and emotion behind the words. And that commitment can be scary because if we're exposed to that emotion and those ideas of what someone else is saying, we discover things we might be avoiding. That
is interesting. I wasn't expecting that last word.
Right. I mean, just think about it. I didn't have to ask about the strike. I started this episode. I didn't have to ask an actor or writers about something that was sticky for them. Mm-hmm. But I chose to, and then I had to sit with that and not try to fix it and just accept it for what it was. And I had to rely on listening to get through that. So again, 100 examples, but just in context, that's yeah. And
the thing about, okay, I'm understanding, like avoidance, you could have avoided that conversation altogether because it might be uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And you could have avoided not listening because you really didn't want to hear the answer.
No, I didn't want to be appalled at a dinner party by a reality that I have had
can't control either.
Well, can't control.
Yeah.
And literally you'd think maybe I'd studied up a little bit more on that.
Okay.
So yeah, there was mix of emotions, but I sat in it and I asked questions, and we'll get into some of that. But yeah, and
why do you think we avoid emotion?
Well, there's a lot of reasons we avoid emotions. You're asking a 7, and that's our superpower.
It's true.
But I think what he's teaching us here is that sometimes we don't listen because we honestly don't want to hear what the other person has to say.
Which is so sad.
It is. But let me give you an example that makes more sense.
Okay.
So if you are talking to your team and you have to deliver a difficult thing, we deliver the message and then we don't give, even when we allow people to, my favorite, let's just, any questions? So I just drop this thing on you. Any questions?
Yeah, a lot actually.
Yeah, or not. And because what the hell did I just hear?
Yeah.
So we have to be conscious of our emotions. Mm-hmm. So if I'm going to deliver some news that's difficult, I know it's going to be difficult. I might want to start with the emotions that I'm feeling.
Yes, I'm nervous.
I've had to learn to do that. I used to not do that. I would show up confident, full of armor, decorated. Here's the news.
Yeah.
Blah, blah. I don't do that anymore. And because what he's saying is that we have to be aware of our emotions. That doesn't always mean controlling them, but we have to be aware of our emotions before we can even put ourselves in a position to actively listen. Because, and I think, let's go into another example. You're sitting down in a one-on-one with someone who's struggling, mm-hmm. and you have to bring that up. And then you mm-hmm. want to give them a chance to talk through, and so you have to be in a position to listen. Or let's do another example, just to get y'all kind of in the motion of someone comes into your office, you don't know why they want to meet with you. Mm-hmm. They've requested a message out of nowhere, and then you've got to sit there and listen to what they have to say without your mind jumping to 50 different things. Maybe the fact that you needed to finish that thing that they just interrupted. Maybe it's like, okay, this person's been struggling. Who knows what's coming?
Yes.
Or, and this person never really approaches me this way. So what it is. And so you haven't dealt with the emotion. So again, we're not getting into the how-tos just yet, but those are examples that we all experience as leaders.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And then think about the client who you've just pitched the proposal that they asked you to pitch and the pricing. And then all of a sudden they're going through this diatribe of what they don't understand or what they think they understand, but you can clearly know that they don't.
Correct.
But you're so busy, like, how am I going to counter that? How am I going to counter that? You're not listening fully to where you could maybe pick up on some cues that would help you with that. And that is natural.
Yes.
That's for all of us.
Yes.
So I think smart listening, active listening, as it's often called, is something we have to work on.
Yes.
Okay. So I think that, and again, if we allow our emotions, if we don't feel it in that moment. So if somebody barges into your office, barges is a big word, but comes in unexpectedly.
Yeah.
You might want to say, whew.
We call it an ambush.
Right. I need to take a break. I need a minute before we get started.
And that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay too. And so it's like, what am I feeling? I'm feeling anxiety because I'm this person, and just allow yourself that and say, I am actively going to listen to what this person has to say. Okay. So because of this, we can't be good listeners unless we're self-aware. There's no way to denote that we're struggling in an emotion if we haven't done awareness work.
Right.
Which means knowledge work first. By the way, we just finished 2 episodes on the Enneagram. Dive into there. You want some extra knowledge. And knowledge precedes awareness. So the way Seth recommends that we listen is he says to participate in live interaction with people. Don't worry about taking notes.
Just listen.
Which is, I think that just depends.
It does.
I think taking notes is a very smart thing to do in certain circumstances.
Yes,
but alternatively, and I've thought a lot about this, is that I think what you could do is recap, if it's a conversation, a one-on-one conversation where you need to have follow-up, actively encourage both of you to let's work on some follow-up from this discussion. Mm-hmm. And here's what I heard. And he gives us some other steps. So, and then he says that we need to pay back the people that we're listening to with enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. And we need to pay attention and respond. So a lot of his advice, it doesn't work in every scenario that could be out there in terms of all the ways we need to be listening. So take that take that into consideration when you're listening through this list. He says, don't ask questions as much as make statements building on what you just heard. And I've always thought that, and again, curiosity, but you can still be curious with a statement. You don't have to always be curious with a question.
Yes.
Because sometimes a question can put somebody off.
It's like a derailer.
And what you could do is say, I'm hearing you say,
right.
I want to further understand that more.
Yes.
That opens that person up to
explain.
And so I think that's probably one of the most powerful things that he teaches. And it says, he said, we can also take what we've heard and use it to progress something forward.
Yes.
So let's say we hear something positive for someone else and we don't really know, we've listened, we've heard that. We're like, I can't forget that. Like, I know that to be true. I'm going to use that going forward. Or conversely, I've had a difficult conversation with so-and-so today about something they're struggling with the organization. And I've heard that before. We're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to figure out what's going on because this is not the first time I've heard this and I can't ignore this anymore.
Right. Why do I keep hearing this?
Right. So that may not be an exchange between you and the person speaking, but that's
yourself.
Remember, thinking sometimes the best type of listening is what you're processing internally, not necessarily what you're saying back. And I think where I have fallen short is I just want to respond to everything verbally because I felt like that was the right thing to do. I've had to learn to just process some of these things. So then he also says, if you disagree, take a beat and try not to challenge the speaker. Instead, challenge the idea. So as I don't get what you're saying. I don't understand what you're saying would be a typical challenge. I don't understand that idea. I don't understand what that concept to me.
Something.
Or it's not foreign to me necessarily. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But if it isn't, say, I see that situation in such a narrow context. Let's talk through this more. And so I think that is important. And then lastly, he says, pay back the people that you're listening to with enthusiasm.
Like show them that you're hearing it.
Show them. There's different ways to do that. I mean, you and I, when we first started doing this podcast, I had these tics. And, David, our producer's like, quit umming and whatever, but he finally gave up. Because if I'm not doing that, that is my way of keeping myself grounded by me going, so that I'm staying with you.
Right.
And not trying to, which was really hard for me at first because I felt like I had to be a step ahead of you because I had no confidence in myself that I could just, without a note, say the next thing. And then that over time, I proved myself wrong. I am capable of responding to you because I'm listening. But I have my things that I have to do to listen to you. You shake your head. Mm-hmm. I do that too. And then I also, and that helps us. If it's annoying as hell, listeners, we're sorry. We're trying to listen to
I hear myself do it all the time and I loathe it. But that's because it's me.
Exactly. So anyway, that's the list to kind of get us going.
That's good. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is so rich and appreciated, all that you're sharing with us about Seth, and I'm following you completely. What's a shame is that we're taught to do the very opposite of what you have described above.
Yeah.
Like what you just said previously is all nil in terms of what we're taught as kids.
Yeah, I mean, we're taught to be passive listeners in school. Just, we're taught to, let the other person talk. I mean, and you just sit there and listen, and then half the time, we're trying not to fall asleep, or we're writing notes to the cutie next to us, or we're thinking about Taylor Swift and the Eras tours. I don't know I'm sure that's what's happening a lot at around these days. But when Seth is teaching us, he's teaching us about active listening, and that requires at times that you do interrupt when you need clarification, and it requires you ask truly difficult questions when the speaker is finished. And he says, if it's worth listening to, it's worth questioning until you understand it.
Okay.
And sometimes, again, like he said earlier in the list that we'll share in our show notes, is that it doesn't always have to be in the form of a question. Mm-hmm. So you can question somebody with a statement and asking for more. So what we're taught is just shut up and listen. And I see that everywhere.
All the time.
Listen, and then we wait till this Q&A. Whereas if we could design what we have to say to be a little bit more fluid, and I know that if you've listened to me give plenty of talks to this team since I've been on this journey, and I'll say, first of all, I start with the emotions I'm feeling. I'm super excited. I'm nervous. I'm anxious. I'm dealing with something externally, whatever. And what I have to say is really important. So if you're not following me at any time, man, just jump in. Like, don't wait till the end.
Yes.
Because it's going to be more meaningful for everyone else too.
Yes.
And that's the other thing. And he doesn't really say this, but I do think like we can learn to be better listeners as a group, and not just think, okay, I'm going to speak up because it's going to help someone else too. I'm not the only one sitting here not following this.
Shaking my head. It can be something as simple as that.
Right. And so I think it's, again, just most of what we share on this podcast is all about being conscious.
Yes.
And listening is one of those things. There are plenty of tools out there for how to be a better listener.
Yeah.
I really think this is one of those things that consciousness and common sense can remedy most of what you're dealing with.
Agreed.
So, I mean, that's just what I believe with.
And when it comes to listening and leadership, like I realized, and I tell you this, I think this is still my biggest complaint as a leader to you, with you privately, which is now not private anymore. That I struggle, I can see lack of movement in things, which I know you struggle with me and others as well. But so am I not delivering the news? So talk to me a little bit about what outcomes leaders should be listening to relative to good listeners on their teams. Like what's happening when there's good listening happening, or if I'm a good listener, what's happening?
Yeah. I mean, I know from my experience, when I think us as a group, or me in one of my personal relationships, is I think the number one thing that I look for is a signal that I'm being heard or I'm hearing someone else, is when we're able to, there's meaningful and relatable exchanges throughout. Questions, statements, clarification, tell me more. I love tell me more. So I that's first and foremost, that's how I know. And then when you're listening, you're focused on what's being said versus what you're going to say next. That doesn't mean that you don't say something next, but that you're like, I'm just going to sit here and hear what this person has to say.
Instead of really absorbing it in.
No, not instead of, actually absorbing it in versus what am I going to say to this person. Okay. So this is like more maybe a one-on-one exchange.
Okay, got it.
Versus what am I going to say next? Okay. I'm not necessarily thinking this is a team situation on this particular point. Okay. But it's like, I'm just going to sit here and hear them, and I'm not going to allow my mind to wander around with, oh God, how am I going to come back with that?
Yes.
I'm just going to sit with what they had to say, and then I'm going to take a deep breath.
Yes.
And then I'm most likely going to say, so what I'm hearing you say is. I would say that most of the times when we fail as leaders to listen, it's in those moments where we're having a bit of a difficult exchange. Totally. Because that's when our emotions get out of control.
Totally.
And then that's when we go to remedy. And that's what I was doing. And I think I could have shown up in a way that where I could just listen and not try to fix it and say, I'm going to sit with this for a minute. And I want to make sure I heard what you were saying. I want to make sure that I fully understand what was just shared. Okay. Then you can ask more questions, ask for more context, and it's okay to say, I'm going to think about this for a while. That is one of the most difficult things that I can do. The way I'm built. I'm a fixer, I'm a solutions provider, and I can't stand sitting in we're not going to do anything.
Right. It's
okay to do that. I don't have a remedy for this right now. In fact, I just was working with someone the other day, and they had shared with me, this was in a therapy session, that I need to be comfortable in the I don't know.
Yay.
I don't know. Like literally, I don't know if this person is struggling with something that I can help them with at this company right now, or if this is the right fit for them. For example, it was on something personal, but it's like, I don't really know what the outcome is, but I have to sit with this for a minute. Mm-hmm. I have to realize that. I have to accept that if this person's, again, I'm using the example of someone not being happy with what's going on, or trying to communicate that they're not happy working at our company anymore. I would immediately, in my history, is immediately try to fix that for them.
Right. I mean,
you know what I'm saying? So I know the leaders, that's one of the things that we typically can be dealt with, because we immediately go to, what does that mean if this person doesn't want to be here? What are we doing wrong? Or how are we going to do the work? Or blah, blah, blah. Like, we go to these places. Unfortunately, we have to create solutions. It's our job. But we don't always have to do it right there and then in that moment when we really haven't allowed ourselves to think through it.
Right.
So I would say that also, being able to find the root of the problem and being able to communicate effectively when you get to the part of fixing it. So sometimes the root of the problem, again, is the follow-up, a question, a statement, and then giving yourself time to process it. That's just another extension of what we were talking about. And then I would say that people you lead want to share and engage with you more than not.
Yes.
So, they'll be more motivated to share if they know that you're a good listener to them. But why would I speak to someone who's not taking the time to fully understand what I have to say, or asking thoughtful questions, or leading me to tell them more? We build trust by doing these simple things, but it does not come naturally. If you're naturally someone who your mind goes to, you pick up on 3/4 of what the person's saying and you're already preparing your response, that's me. If you're that type of person. If you're the type of person that's like, I'm hearing them, but I'm not saying a damn word. Like I'm intimidated to say something or whatever. There's a lot of different ranges and scenarios for different people. I think it's just, if we can commit ourselves to doing things that prepare us to listen more deeply. Again, Seth calls it active listening. In fact, you can Google active listening. There's a bunch of resources out there on that. But active listening is essentially showing up and being prepared to listen to someone, not just hear what they say. Listening means we have to process what we're hearing, and we have to care about it more. So I think this is not like a buttoned up, tidy list. This is not one of those things. And again, there's plenty of lists and things you can do with eye contact and all the stuff, all these tricks and tips out there. We didn't want this episode to be like that.
Right.
I wanted it to be more experiential.
Yeah.
And how we've experienced and what we're doing to listen more effectively. This is certainly, something that is you're constantly having to work on.
That's right.
In my opinion, as a leader and a person.
One that something we didn't talk about, and I think I know why you didn't bring it up, but is interrupting. Mm-hmm. As a good listener, and I want to clarify that. Mm-hmm. I think it's more, as a leader, you have to manage your interruptions.
Yes.
It's kind of like picking your battles. Mm-hmm. Like pick it. Pick the right moment, pick the right question, or pick the right statement, mm-hmm. and make it worth it.
I think there's I don't know, I've never read this, I've never seen this anywhere, but it's in my head listening to you, is that there's different kinds of interruptions.
Totally.
There's an interruption that's valid, and that's what Seth teaches, is the interruption for more clarification or a question. It's needed. Like, wait a minute, before you move on, I need to understand more about this. Then there's the interruption where you're just going to start talking and not let take over the conversation. It's that latter one.
That's the problem.
That's the problem. And so I remember thinking, I can't interrupt at all because that's something I'm doing. And then I was like, wait a minute. There is a positive way.
Yes.
A helpful, a constructive way to interrupt.
Like when you
and then think about that.
Yeah, you'll say your interruption that's welcome. Whenever I hear it,
mm-hmm.
it starts like this. Let's think about it this way. Mm-hmm. Or you'll say,
you're saying how I interrupt you.
This is how you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, or like in groups,
mm-hmm.
me or groups or others. Mm-hmm. Like I watch you do it and I love it. Like I'm like, oh, that's a good reason. Mm-hmm. Well, have we thought about it this way? Mm-hmm. Or you'll say something very deep, like, let's go deeper. Tell me more, but why are you feeling that way? Mm-hmm. Like, before you go on mm-hmm. this rant person that you're talking to, mm-hmm. let me just stop you right there. First of all, thank you for being vulnerable. You'll do that. Mm-hmm. And I love that mm-hmm. because then you've opened the ground, you've laid the groundwork for an honest dialogue to come after that.
Yeah. But again, I had to work on that because the former version of myself would, in this context, would just start talking. I could just rattle on, and some of it was good because it was empathetic at times, and
sure.
And I could meet people where they were, and I could say I've experienced that before. It still wasn't healthy from the standpoint of I wasn't allowing the person to fully share what they had to share, especially in the one-on-one circumstances or when things were difficult. The team piece of it, I think more of the traditional tactics for better listening I utilized to become a better listener when I had to stand up and share information.
It was like empathy.
Yeah. It was like, okay. And, but again, I think too, we've worked a lot on our culture to where we respect people who are speaking no matter what it is.
Yeah.
And we had to work on that.
That's really hard. And to me, it's hard.
Yeah. And I had to find a way to also show up and emulate what I wanted happening around here.
What do you think you know for sure about listening as a leader?
I can tell you right now, it is a process of very gradual steps before, because what it requires is just a lot of your own understanding yourself and then paying attention to others. It takes a while to start paying attention to listening.
Yes.
So it's gradual but it is intentional. Like it is just grounded in those things, and it will not happen overnight. It shouldn't really ever stop. I don't know that we ever get to the point where we're like, forever and ever, amen, I'm the best listener on the planet because I've done all the work and I was intentional and I let it happen. No, because then you're going to have a change. Something's going to change in the dynamic that throws you off your game a bit, that might put you in a position of not being the best listener. And that could be you learned how to be a great listener to your teenage kid, and then all of a sudden they're adults.
Yeah.
If you think that the way you listen then is the way you need to listen, no, it changes.
Honestly, yay.
Well,
I'm listening.
hang on, sister. Yeah. So I know that's for sure. And, I know that when you care about listening and you at least make an attempt, you will see improvements in the relationships in your business and life. Or life is all of the things, but in your business and personal is what I would say. And I think that, again, listening should ultimately lead to a two-way exchange. It doesn't always have to be a full conversation, especially if, it's a group dynamic and you've heard a presentation or something, but that's when the realness happens. And I know when I present information, when I can give more than what I gave because of a good question or for a follow-up or even a counter idea, a counter thought, or have you thought, it enriches the experience. And what I used to try to do was present everything to where there were no questions. I was trying to literally eliminate the questions because I wanted to say everything there was needed to say. And then I burdened everybody with a 2-hour something that they're just knee-night at the end. They couldn't even listen if they wanted to because they probably had to go to the restroom and they were hungry and they were tired.
Yeah.
I learned to say what needed to be said and open up that dialogue. I learned that from listening to people, trying to be a good listener, and I knew that wasn't the scenario that was good. I knew that, 50 slides with 10 bullet points each was not a good way to get someone to listen to your ideas, right? So, and we have a whole episode on public speaking. Some of this goes into that. And the shared commonality is you want to create an environment where people actually want to listen to you. What do people most likely want to listen to, no matter what the content is story.
That's right.
Storytelling. So, and I think practice matters. This is something that has to be practiced. And I would find some accountability, some folks on your team, maybe, and again, asking, do you think I'm a good listener? And then when they say yes, don't stop there. Tell me what makes me a good listener. And if they're like, maybe you're going to get a lot of yeses, but surely there's someone out there that can say, I don't know, maybe not. I mean, my daughter's the first to tell me that I wasn't a good listener. I didn't need a 26% approval rating. I already knew it from a 12-year-old at home. We weren't on the same page. And it's hard to get on the same page with an adolescent, soon to be teen. But we figured it out.
Yeah.
And
because you were willing to listen.
Right. But it was two-way.
Yes, she was willing to tell you.
She was willing to tell me. I was willing to listen. And then we were willing to evolve that over time.
I mean, I think she's, not to segue into Mackie, but to segue into Mackie, she's such a good communicator because she probably said that and other things to you, truthfully, because you gave her that space, that opportunity to have that free conversation.
Yes.
With no scary consequences that kids think. But anyway,
yeah, because
she's
we are
an excellent communicator.
Well, thank you.
She's young.
That means a lot. And I think too is trying to strip away, just shut up and listen. I think that's the worst thing we can do.
Tell a kid.
I just think it's the worst thing that anyone,
so
just take it.
Yeah.
Just sit here and
terrible.
And not that those words are used necessarily in the school system, but we reward people that way. Our kids, like we're saying, stand on this line and don't speak, and yes, there's a time for us to
be seen, not heard.
Yeah. That kind of mentality it was so drastic when we were growing up.
Yes.
And I think that's changed. And I think there's a drastic, consequences on the other side.
Sure.
I just feel like we need to provide space for listening and learning.
I think that we owe the next generation of professionals the gift of being able to communicate effectively. Not saying the baby boomer generation didn't do that for us, because they certainly gave us lots of opportunities, but did they help us by saying, sit down and shut up?
No.
No, they didn't. If we want people to be having strong opinions that are going to sway the way the world goes relative to big ass decisions we all have to make.
Hopefully progress.
It's coming. It's going to be progress. That's right. But the only way to do that is to have people who can talk to each other.
That's right. And we've
somehow.
Yeah. And it's communication's like a bigger, because it's like the art of debate. Like we don't know how to debate. No. We don't know how to see someone else's opinion. Yeah. There's just these
It's a problem.
It's a problem. And I know that doesn't necessarily drive all of what we're doing here, but I ultimately think the things that we're learning and that we're sharing on this podcast should ultimately help us collectively down the road.
Yeah.
If we're a better listener, we can sit with someone who doesn't agree with us, who has an opposite opinion that we do.
And that's okay.
And we can hear them and we can be interested in, wow, why do you believe that?
Right.
Without trying to sway them.
That's right.
But that's where the discipline comes in. For a lot of us is what we want to sway them to think the way that we do. And I know that's a whole different podcast, but this plays into it, listening.
Well, I could say, at this juncture of the episode, we're nearing the end. Mm-hmm. If people are still listening, mm-hmm. they didn't end it when you started talking about the writer's strike. Because there are probably some people who are going to end it.
Because I was
talking about it.
It's
something they don't want to listen to.
Oh, got it. Versus being curious about.
That's right.
I listened to Danelle. She,
had this perspective. That was interesting. I haven't heard that before. Mm-hmm. Or it explained that way or whatever. Like, we need more of that.
Yeah.
We need more of that and less of, I don't agree, I'm turning it off. Listen.
Oh, yeah. Listen. Yeah.
Just listen.
Or it makes me uncomfortable. Not that topic would make anybody really uncomfortable, but you're right. It's an example like that.
It is. So if you're still listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would love to know what you think about it.
Good for you.
Yeah.
All right. Let's transition to our music moment, which is also something that we all love to listen. I think everybody does. I'm going to say this universally.
That's a big claim.
Hamilton.
Yes. I hope everyone has had the chance to see it or at least listen to the music.
Well, if you haven't seen it, it is on Disney Plus, and I think they sold, their sales went through the roof on their app when they released the Hamilton, and then it came back down.
Yes.
After everybody watched it. But you just went
I did. Again. Yeah. This was the second time to see it live, and I've certainly seen the one on Disney. I mean, right when it came out.
Yes.
I remember it was right after the pandemic, and it was our first trip, and we had to find a place to where we could watch it for Mackie Payton and her friend Reagan, who was with us. And every experience I've had with Hamilton, the first time it was so incredible. It was still some of the original cast, but
this one you
no.
Okay,
the first time I saw it, was Mackie was in high school.
It's been a minute. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Mackie. I mean, it was right
6
when it
years
first.
ago.
It wasn't, but some of the main characters like Lin-Manuel Miranda, they had already gone to the second Hamilton, but some of the original characters were still there. So, and then we were with some friends of ours and being just experiencing something. It's magical to experience live, and being blown away, and just to see Mackie in this instance. But our friend that was there, she's a performer in LA, and she was like, didn't know that her friend was in it. And I don't remember. I think he was George Washington.
Yeah.
And then she messaged her. Our friend is Tammy. She does listen to the podcast. So, hey, Tammy. And she messaged her friend, and next thing you know, the show is over, and Mackie and Tammy got to go backstage at Hamilton. So my first experience with Hamilton was really hard to beat, just to getting to see see it.
With your kid.
And then get to see your kid get to experience something.
Broadway.
Right. And by this time, again, she was in high school, so that was the pursuit. I think that was a big inspiration for her. But to see it again, I saw it with 3 people friends of ours who haven't seen the show, and it is magical for me to see it again, and to see all new faces and a whole new cast of people that getting the amazing opportunity to tell that story, and on that stage. And then, but also to watch our friends and to hear their experience afterwards. It was just, that will never get old for me.
No.
And I think, and again, if you can't go see the show, even just listening to the music itself, it's like nothing I've ever experienced. And so, and again, rap is not my first genre of music that I gravitate towards. I appreciate it. I don't hate it. But every time I listen to either the soundtrack and now I've seen it 3 times, I learn something new. And something about it, whatever I'm experiencing in my life, I have different emotions attached to it. Sometimes I'm just attached to the audacity of that part of our history and what happens to Hamilton, what happens to the people of that generation who were, they were fighting for our country. This time I was more touched by the love interest or the relationships in it. And so that's what I think good shows of any kind that you can see on a repeated basis that can bring you that much depth. I think that's where art is and what makes it so meaningful. But yeah, I feel really, really good that I got to see that again. And I hope all of you get the chance to see it someday.
I think it's going on tour. I think it's been on tour. It's been on tour, but it's coming back. It's looping back to Texas. So they'll be here. I was supposed to see it.
You were.
During the pandemic.
Yes.
Yes. But I got my money back.
Okay.
Because of the COVID.
Well,
but anyway, I still haven't seen it live, but I'm going to see it when it comes back through DFW.
Good.
For sure.
Good.
All right. Well, what we'll do is we'll bring it to a close today.
All right.
And any links that we have, we'll add to the show notes. Remember to please tell a friend about the podcast. Maybe somebody who needs help listening. Be sure to visit beselfsmarter.com. Give it a visit. See if anything piques your interest. We've got tools and resources available there for you in coaching opportunities. And until next week, we send you into the week with grateful hearts.
Goodbye, everyone.
As always, you can connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at Self Smarter Podcasts. You can also leave a rating or review if you enjoyed what you heard today. Not only does this mean so much to us, but it also helps other leaders and future leaders find our community. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us in becoming self-smarter. This podcast is produced by Snacks Media and music is from a free platform. Well, that is until Brandy Carlisle reaches out to us to write the original score for our podcast. Friends, have a great rest of your day.